Do you want to hustle harder in sales? This episode shows you how. Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast. In this episode, we have the authors of the brand new book, Tested, Alpesh and Buki, and we're diving into hustle. What hustle means for them, the definitions, how we can leverage it in the world of sales to close more business, and how you, Sales Nation, can implement it into your day. And so with all that said, let's jump into today's episode. Guys, welcome to the Salesman Podcast. Freeway conversation. I'm excited to have you both on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Glad to have you both on. Okay, so we're going to talk about hustle. We're going to try and dissect it. What I want to, at the end of the conversation, to achieve is whether I want us to understand what hustle is, whether it's a tool that B2B sales professionals in particular should be going out of their way to leverage, and then if that is true, how we can get more of it. And there's going to be multiple levels of this, and I'm sure there's going to be some deep psychoanalysts that will go on with it as well. But the first question I'm going to throw at you is how do you answer this separately if you can? Because I think there's multiple interpretations to this, but how do you both define hustle?
Good question. I think it's a big question. You know, hustle can be seen as a derogatory term in some cases, but really, I think from my perspective, I think in life, in business, in sales, you have to be prepared to do what is needed to be done in order to get your result. Now, obviously ethically, but you have to be able to do that. One of the things that we say, in fact, we mention in the book Tested, is you don't have to know everything, but you need to be prepared to do anything, or do everything, sorry. And I think that's what hustle's about. It's making stuff happen. You know, making stuff happen and being pragmatic about the way that you sell in order to get an objective. So that's my take on hustle, and that the facets of that, there are various facets of that depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and from my side, I think the hustle, yes, is like Buki said, it's been used as a derogatory term, you know, a pool hole hustler, you know, potting pool balls and getting quick money. And hustlers generally have been defined as someone who's like been on the streets and they're hustling, trying to get make $2 here and $5 there. But I think now that the word has become so mainstream, it's been glamorized by the likes of Puff Daddy, Jay-Z, and now even Gary Vaynerchuk his whole talks right now is all about the hustle. Right? Hustle to me as an entrepreneur, or rather as a hustler turned entrepreneur, hustle is what we call an activity of your entrepreneurship journey, right? If I'm an entrepreneur and I've set up my business, I'm trying to save my costs, I've got to go and hustle the landlord to give me a rent discount, right? I've got to go and hustle him. That means I've got to be on his case. Please give me a rent discount. A hustle is it's an action. It's an action. And as per the book that we just released, Tested, the subtitle is very clear. The dream is free, but the hustle comes at a cost. We can all dream as much as we want, but if we're not executing on our vision, we are daydreaming. Now, in order to realize your vision, you've got to hustle your vision. It's not going to come to you. You've got to go and get it. And that movement is called the hustle.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Buki. So, are salespeople too soft? And what I mean by that is, if you're an entrepreneur, I know for me, and we kind of touched on this before we click record, when I moved out of sales and started doing the podcast and everything that we're doing here, all the live content and the shows that we're putting on in the near future, it was taking a step back. It was moving in with one of my good mates to reduce, well, essentially the rent was zero at that point when I moved in with him. And it was sucking it up and getting rid of the corporate BMW that I had, the company car. And it was taking multiple steps back to then, at this point now, 2.5, 3 years in, now I'm making more money than I did in medical device sales. And the kind of cap there obviously doesn't exist within the world of entrepreneurship, media, and the podcasts. Are salespeople too soft in the fact that they follow the rules when perhaps an entrepreneur doing a sales role who is being a quote-unquote hustler perhaps wouldn't be bound by the same rules that a sales professional is?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think one of the problems with salespeople, and you know, one of the things that we like to talk about is being intrapreneurial. You can have an intrapreneurial approach within a corporate setting. One of the problems or one of the challenges for salespeople is that they're not able to think outside of the box continuously, right? So what happens is that they don't take advantage of what I describe as the stuff in between. You know, a person making a cold call, you know, can make a cold call and hear no, right? they can accept the no, or they can try and turn it around. Now, they can try and turn it around by challenging the person they're speaking to, or they can be creative in the way that they turn that around. And that's the stuff in between. And that's the difference between, one more sale a day, which times 200 makes a massive difference to a top salesperson than an average salesperson. So I think, people aren't creative enough in the way that they try to achieve their sales objectives. And I think, I wouldn't say they're too soft. I just think they need to hustle a bit more. Yeah, they need to look at what's the stuff in between. What's going to allow me to be the one that's different to achieve my objectives. And I think so that would be my answer. Yeah.
And Alpesh, let me ask you this: just on that, we'll use the example of a cold call. So I know I quote unquote hustle far harder now than I ever did in medical device sales, but it's because I own this. I own the growth of it. I care intrinsically so much more about this because it's having more impact and more reach, and I get direct feedback on people praising the show and how it's helped them and how it's improved not just their ability to hit target, but everything else that comes along with that, better communication skills with relationships and everything else. So I am more motivated to hustle, to break rules, to ethically grow the audience as quick as possible, and to sell the ad space and do everything else. I'll make calls now. 1 o'clock in the morning, I was on the phone with a company in Australia the other day. I'd have never done that in medical device sales. Is this a mindset that of almost the entrepreneurial hustle? Is that a mindset that a B2B sales professional can instill in themselves and have success with? Or is there just too much of a separation between someone who owns a company, who loves it to death, who will do all this, versus the sales professional who doesn't have a stake in the company, on a capital perspective, but earns commission on what they sell?
Yeah, no, I think it's like what Buki mentioned about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is when you're on your own. You're jumping off a cliff and trying to build a plane on the way down. Right?
I like that.
Right? And if you're most likely you're going to crash and burn. But some people who are very, very good salespeople, like I did $500 million plus for Motorola in 3 years. Now, why did I do that? And I didn't do $500 million when I had my own phone company, because I was in a support structure of a behemoth giant with processes, with the structures, with very, very clever people that could support my growth in the company. And because I only did what I did best, which was selling. I had someone who managing the finance, someone managing the operations, someone managing the logistics, etc. What makes it really, really great for salespeople within corporate environments is when they're selling something that has some kind of IP, that has some kind of brand equity. Now, today, the very reason you're happier today than you were selling medical devices is because you have some kind of brand equity. It gives you much more internal confidence when you go to the market to pitch your services. Now, if I was a salesperson in a corporate environment, my biggest frustration is going to be coming from what? Just getting turned down all the time. No, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. So I've got to go back and look at my products and my services and say, what do I need to do in terms of with my R&D department or my marketing department or my innovation department to say, how do we make this better so that in the customer's eyes, we're solving his problem? When you get that thing done, you will find that your sales process just becomes much more easier.
How do we do that then? And I'm very aware that this is a whole 4-hour show in itself to find perhaps internal product market fit with your specific customers and your specific kind of like product range that you're selling. But is there a way to shortcut this somewhat of enabling yourself to be excited and have that entrepreneur kind of like motivation?
You see, it's all about, first of all, who is your target customer, right? What is the challenges that your target customer faces every day? Whether they're a 18-year-old university student or whether it's a 30-year-old single mom, what are the challenges that your users are facing? Take those challenges and then match that with what product and services you have, and then find out what's the fit.
Yeah.
When you start talking to the customers and you start offering your products, but with emotional intelligence, with empathy, you will then get into the heart of the customer. That means that customer will always come back to you.
What's an example of that? Because it's one thing to say emotional intelligence and throw that in there. Make it practical for the audience.
Okay, so I can give you an example from my perspective what I did. When I set up my phone, which was the first African devices brand in 2008, there were tons of phones coming from China, right? Every phone was $20. I mean, I was just fighting on price. It was frustrating. But what I did was the day Barack Obama became president. I launched the My Obama phone in Kenya. And I sold 10,000 phones in 1 week because I put Obama's face on the phone. I put the colors, I put his ringtones, his wallpapers. I gave something back to the people of Kenya because he's half Kenyan, right? So what I did there was innovation. Innovation is taking a traditional business model and flipping the script. I took the same phone, but I just tweaked it a bit to cater for the emotional aspect and emotional relationship that my customers had with Barack Obama. So that's just an example. I don't know if that resonates with you.
One of the things that, just to add to that, I think some people out there might be saying, well, you can do that because it's your business, but everybody can do that at a lower level or at a different level. So I always talk about the concept of product malleability, making your products fit into what your client is trying to achieve or your prospect is trying to achieve. Many a time, having dealt with thousands of salespeople, if there's not an immediate fit, an obvious fit, they just let it go. But the focus of your sales should be, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your objective? And if I can understand what their objective is, what they're trying to accomplish, then it behooves me to be creative about how my product can help them meet that objective. And that's a way of hustle. It's creative selling and going beyond the extra mile. There's a lot now about there's these different methodologies, the challenger methodologies and insight selling. I think the biggest thing in selling today is and there's always been, is relationships. But you're going to improve the quality of your relationship and the level of your relationship if you can get to the core of what your customer or prospect is trying to accomplish, and then creatively, and this is where the skill comes in, show them how your product can help them achieve that. Even if you don't have the power to change the model, so to speak. And that's a hustle that I don't think enough salespeople are doing today.
Is that a gap, Buki, in between the facts and the figures that marketing give us of this product does X, Y, Z versus the perceived benefits of it? And when I mean perceived, it's almost in the eye of the beholder as obviously you hit all the recommendations that is in the need and the specification for the buyer. But then after that point, it's then how well you can communicate and then engineer and put into practice everything else that goes alongside that. And if you can, I appreciate you plucking this out of the air, but how much of the sale is down to this solves, I need a camera system in medical devices to see inside the patient? How much of the sale is based on, I need a camera system versus I want to work with the company, which is in my case, which essentially invented endoscopic surgery. I want to have all the history. I want to have the kind of the brand that's involved in that as well. And I want people to walk into my theaters, see that I'm using the best piece of equipment and resonate with that. How much of the sale is down to the facts and the figures versus the perceived value in all of this?
Well, I think it's somewhere in between. And I think that last point that you made is a very big point. Because let's face it, right? Companies don't buy, people do. If I can understand where this person is coming from, that can be the difference between me getting the sale and not. And I think that example is perfect. If I want to look good, if I want to have the best of the best, and here's the other thing, people won't always tell you that. So then it comes back to the basics of really eliciting that kind of information. And how are you going to elicit that? By asking questions, but not asking the obvious questions, getting to the core of what the person is trying to achieve, what they're trying to accomplish. And that's exactly what you did there. But you're bang on the money. Again, Will.
It's only from fluke. And a lot of this is quite funny. A lot of the insights I have now, and examples like that, I had no idea what I was doing at the time in medical device sales. But looking back, I can pull out the bits that I did well. And obviously I used loads of examples of where I screwed up as well. But it's only that you spend a little bit of time contemplating and have a conversation with people like yourself that allowed me to think about all this. I always say I was 70-80% in the leaderboard when I was in medical devices. If I went back now, I would be disappointed not to be kind of that 1-2% with all the knowledge and just the reflection of things, which leads me back onto hustle. So we've kind of defined it. We've put it into the context of an entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur versus the stereotypical B2B salesperson. How do we get, or can we get more of it? And this might go into motivation and intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation as well. But how do we increase this level of hustle? Because we've all been in this scenario where we wake up, it's, perhaps the end of the month before we hit target, or that we're supposed to hit target. There's 2 or 3 deals that need to come in, and we will hustle the hell out of them. We will not be in these boxes. We will make calls to people within the organization that we wouldn't normally call, either up, down, or either side of the vertical. We will go and visit people when perhaps we would hide behind emails. We would go the extra mile. How can we instill that hustle that we get when we're close, when we can taste hitting target, to spread it out across the year so that we hit target quicker and easier?
Yeah, well, I think if you don't mind, I think you've got to step back in order to say, okay, at the end of next quarter, I want to do X. I've got to say, okay, what is it? What is X? And then work backwards, right? So you have the goal and then you work backwards. So knowing in reality that you need a sales funnel, knowing in reality that half of your opportunities are not going to materialize, and you don't want to end up looking like a fool when you've given all these forecasts to your company that I'm going to bring in X amount of dollars and you don't bring in anything. We had the same challenges with Motorola, but we'd always planned way in advance to create what we call opportunities, and then qualify those opportunities, shortlist those opportunities, and start targeting them, so that by the time you get to the end of the quarter, it's relatively easy to have the order already in your back pocket, because you knew that this was coming, so you just become more prepared for it. And if you're just relying on one customer, you're probably going to get let down, and that's the biggest thing. The biggest mistake is to put all your eggs in one basket. So I would start off with probably 20 opportunities, and just keep on filtering them all the way, maybe left with 5 really good ones, so that that even if one of them messes up, you still got 4 coming in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Also, on top of that, I would also say, which a catalyst to the hustle, so to speak, the hustle mindset in the context that we're talking about it now, is exactly that, the mindset. It's what Alpesh spoke about, goals, and they're important. But 2015 we did a talk, and I talked about the importance of setting big, hairy, audacious goals, huge ones, which is going to create a mindset whereby you're excited, but you're scared, but you're in a place where you do what I describe as innovate to accelerate. When you get into that position, first of all, you come up with lots of ideas. Right? So innovation is important. And you want to capitalize on those ideas, which means you're going to do what you need to do in order to make it happen. And being in that mindset from get-go allows you to master or take advantage of the art of the hustle, as opposed to waiting till you have to get your 200 grand or 20 grand from your target, and you have to adopt that mindset then. Why wait till that point when you can have that all the time, every day, by creating the right mindset conducive to higher performance and quantum shifts in sales? Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Are we, as B2B sales professionals, overcomplicating this? Can it be narrowed down to take both of your insights then of, if you have a process, if you know if you work backwards from the number of deals you need to close to month on month, number of calls you need to make, number of emails you need to make, and so you've got that habit in place. But tied in with that, if we were to make a formula of kind of process plus ridiculous goal that pushes you out your comfort zone, is that the formula that enables hustle to happen, versus what most of us are trying to do is we've not got either of those in place, and we're trying to make up the difference by working harder, by putting in more hours, by using, some people using weird manipulation tactics and calling that hustle.
Yeah.
I think it's a case of just working smarter, not working hard. I think, you can actually do everything in 2 hours a day and have the rest of the day doing other things if you just plan properly. And really have what we call the focus. You've got to be able to be focused on your customers, what they want, and at the end of the day, you have all these opportunities, but you've got to also qualify those opportunities and know that certain times some customers may be just misleading you and promising you, dangling things in front of you that may not be real. So you also need that kind of a bit of an insight onto human psychology as well, to be able to see, who are you wasting time with? Who are the what we call tire kickers, right?
Yeah, tire kickers. Yeah, and qualify. Yeah, I also think, picking up on what you were saying there, I think it's a combination of passion and science, really. But passion without discipline equals chaos. You've got a much ruder way of saying that, but I can't remember what it is. But, passion without discipline equals chaos. So we want to have the big, hairy, audacious goal. We want to think big, but then that will get us to the place where, we can achieve exponential growth. But then we need to say, how are we going to do it? And that's where all the ratios, etc., comes in. But I think you can't, if you really want to, this guy did $500 million+ in 3 years in barren territory. Sorry, Will, for the pun. In barren territory. Yeah, it wasn't just he was amongst 20 people or 100 people selling. There was no sales from that part of Africa, period. He comes along, and within 3 years of doing $500 million. You can't do that from day one and just say, right, I want to do $500 million and just work it out. You have to have a certain mindset. I also talk about, I've got this acronym. I call it MOST. I'm not sure if I shared it with you before. Mindset, objectives, strategy, and tactics. Most B2B salespeople at the moment are on the last one, tactics. They don't have they're not combining the primary causes of performance with the secondary causes of performance, which are tactics. And when you bring the two together, then you're down the road called exponential growth.
And tell me if I'm right or wrong with this, because I might be way off, because I'm pulling in different kind of thoughts and insights here to make a picture. But it almost reminds me of, I think it's called the barbell, I think it's the barbell investing strategy of you go with something crazy one end and you were crazy the other, and knowing that in the middle is the conservative space where most people put their money, and so that very rarely changes. And if one end of the barbell changes, it's very likely it goes up. It's like the other one's going to struggle, and then if this goes down, it's very likely the other one's going to go up. So you're playing the best of both odds by playing what seems like a risky scenario on one side, but then when you do the maths and you look at the data, it's actually less risky than just playing in the middle. And what we're describing here, it almost seems like you have a ridiculous, audacious goal on one side, but then you do what is somewhat conservative of knowing the numbers and the data and how many calls you need to make and all this on the other side, and you're playing from both ends. Whereas I feel like most salespeople are kind of alluding to what you alluded to then, Buki, of playing in the middle. They're just plodding along, and they're not relying on really making an effort on having a huge goal, and so breaking out barriers and breaking out the box and doing things that essentially their competition aren't doing. And they're also not playing super conservatively and having habits and being dedicated. They're kind of just dabbling in all these things and playing in the middle and not having as good a results because of that. Does that make sense to you guys? Is there something to that?
Well, it's living in your comfort zone, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's a better way to describe it. I could that would have saved 5 minutes of everyone listening if I'd have come up with that.
I've always said that your life only really begins once you step outside of your comfort zone. I always say that, if you stretch a rubber band, you stretch, and you bring it back it'll never come back to its original size, because every time you stretch it, you learn, you grow. Sales guys have to be able to always keep on educating themselves, because most salespeople are self-starters. They're self-motivated. They are basically on their own, right? A lot of the times. And I really feel that they have to just keep on educating themselves, keep on stretching the limits to their imagination on how they can take that vision in their mind and make it a reality.
How do you do that? Because again, it's one thing to say it. It's a totally different thing to put that into practice.
I think obviously, whether it's a biblical connotation but there has to be an element of faith. You've got to believe in yourself, Yes, 110%, you will probably lose more times than you win. But the win is going to be so much more sweeter once you've lost so many times, and it just makes you more and more resilient. And I think, I've been rejected so many times, but it's, next time I approach, I take the lessons learned and try and make my approach in a different way. Yeah. But sometimes I've done things several times and realize it's the same thing I'm doing over and over again. Yeah. And why am I not getting a result? It's because I'm doing the same thing over and over again. We've got to start doing new things a bit differently.
What made you have that mindset? That's what I find interesting about this. Did you just wake up and understand and put this into practice and want to get out of your comfort zone and almost are comfortable in getting out of your comfort zone? Or was there a moment in your life that made, out of necessity, perhaps, that made that happen, which give you a feedback loop of, once you got out of your comfort zone the first time, you saw the growth and you progressed from there? Was it a book? What was it? Because again, it's one thing to say this, it's another thing, and hopefully your kind of like story here, Alpesh, you'll be able to explain how it happened for you. But what was the catalyst? Because again, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing for the audience to actually implement it and take action in that moment.
Yeah, my thing has been always about risk taking from day one. I'm a natural born risk taker. That's just who I am. I'm not saying everyone else should be like that. It's you. Trust me, you don't want to even go on some of the journeys that I've been on.
And why is that? What are you? When you say that, do you believe it's your DNA? Do you believe you were born wired to take risks? Because
I believe it's my upbringing. Remember, I come from a very wealthy family in East Africa, and then we got kicked out by Idi Amin back in 1972. So we came to the UK as the original refugees. We came with $200 in our pocket. It's all about resilience. It's all about, a new environment. It's all about, not knowing what's going on, and you're basically in this jungle of the UK, and you don't have any weapons, and you're on your own, and you've got to fend for yourself, right? So that self-sustaining has been ingrained in me from a very, very young age. Now, that's just my journey. When I was at university, besides getting a grant, I started hustling on the side, selling bags and things, because I just always wanted to have something different. I don't want to be like a 9-to-5 person. I haven't come on this earth to be like everyone else, because there's no one else who's like me, and I'm not like anyone else. You see, I think we have to understand, even as salespeople, that we are human beings, and every human being is different. You've just got to look at yourself and say, what is it about me that makes me different?
Well, that is interesting in that you had a struggle. Because I've talked about this on the show many times now, and the people who have, I don't want to downplay, well, the people in medical devices that I know are earning £250,000 plus a year, and they're doing, having great success from that. You only need to do that for a certain period and invest it correctly to, retire early, to live an incredible life. So I'm not playing down anyone listening, any of the B2B sales professionals listening, but the people who have, gone from exits of companies. I interviewed a couple of people over in San Francisco when we were over there a couple of months ago that are both worth, one's worth 100 million, one's worth $250 million. And everyone who are kind of like, as you climb up the ranks, who are the levels that are not unattainable, but are a stretch at anyone's imagination for the most people listening to this, they've all had what you just described, Alpesh, of a moment where they had something, it was taken away, and they had to fight for it again. Is that a trend? Buki, you'll have seen this with all the salespeople you've worked with. Is that a trend that goes across sales professionals who have success, or is that a tool where some people have that experience and then they fail, they fall flat on the face, they get people get depressed, and horrible things happen, and some of them, as kind of you did, Alpesh, use it as a tool, as a positive tool, as an ignition for hustle. Buki, is this something that you see a trend in great sales professionals, that they've had a struggle, they've broken through, and that's opened their eyes to kind of pushing and continuing to move forward through life?
I've seen it in many, it definitely is something that I've seen, and it definitely marks a lot of the top salespeople from the less than top salespeople. Even in my own case, I think one of the things that I had taken away from me was my dignity. I was working in an organization where I had a great boss. He was, a multi-millionaire. He was success personified, but he had a very unorthodox management style. And
is that you being polite by saying that?
Fortunately, he's the greatest employer I had because it worked for me. But he would love you in the first 3 months, right? Because first 3 months, he'd love you. He'd spoil you. He'd make sure you got everything and then some. But after that, if you weren't meeting targets, the rule was you're out of the company. And if you happen to stick around, or he happened to give you the benefit of the doubt, he just wouldn't talk to you, but he would talk to everybody else. And he would laugh and joke and take them out and high-five them and stuff. And I found that because of my upbringing, I don't know. Maybe I need love. I really don't know. But I found that as, very demotivating, but motivating in the same time. And that was my kick. And I found with a lot of salespeople, that's exactly that. They've had something like top salespeople. They've had something like that in them. But I think the biggest thing that you can do is challenge yourself to create, to catalyze this kind of hustle type mindset. I think it's about challenging yourself. It's setting this big, audacious goal, setting yourselves tests. Because if you think about life, it's a series of tests. And if you can pass these tests, whichever side you come on in terms of these, after taking these tests, will determine whether you're going to be successful or whether you're going to be not so successful. So I think one of the ways to get into the space where you hustle success, so to speak, is to challenge yourself and be aware of these tests and be prepared for them, because opportunity doesn't waste time with the unprepared.
So, Buki, let me ask you this, and we'll wrap up with this question for you, Buki, and then the final question for Alpesh, because you've answered it before. So, what is an example of a test that the audience, super practically now, can take away from this episode and they can put into practice? The obvious one seems to be to, go for 10x of your target or something ridiculous. What's another test that a salesperson could put themselves through, today, this week, so that they don't forget about it, they take action on it? What's a test they could put themselves through to just, even if they just stretch their comfort zone a little bit, just to give them a taste of it?
Very basic one. This is a very traditional test. It's very basic, but I think little drops make the mighty ocean. Don't eat or don't have a coffee until you've set up a meeting in the morning. Simple as that. Just a simple test like that. I will not drink coffee. I will not eat. I will not read a paper until I've set up my first meeting. Whether it takes me 5 calls or 500. Hopefully it's not 500. Using my methodology is probably nearer 5. But that is one test. You do that test and you set another test. You set another test around the number of prospects that you turn into active prospects. And then, you do another test around the number of active prospects you turn into closed business. And then you have a beautiful ratio which you can measure yourself against. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. That reminds me a little of something that I do probably every 6 months, probably twice a year. And it was Tim Ferriss that put me onto this. I think it's a stoic process of I spend a weekend without spending any money. And it sounds ridiculous, I know, and it's not a difficult task to do in the UK. And obviously there's kind of money coming in from the podcast, so there's no shortage of cash to buy food and stuff. But I will spend a weekend without spending any money, and that gets me just that little bit out of the comfort zone. And what it does, it reminds me of the time when I first started the show, and I had cash as a runway to grow the business, but I was obviously trying to spend as little of it as possible. So as I talked about at the top of the show, I moved in with one of my mates. I stopped buying just stuff that I didn't need. Even just all the production gear, the cameras, the microphones, everything I was buying was secondhand. I was haggling. I was hustling to get everything as cheap as possible to make this runway last as long as possible. And when I first started doing this kind of like long weekend every 6 months of not spending anything, and of course it means just going around to my girlfriends and getting her to feed me and stuff like this, or even just going back home and spending a bit of time with my parents, or I'll tie it in with if people want to take me locally out for a meal or coffees and things like that. And again, it's not a particularly difficult process, but it's a huge reminder that I don't have to spend 100 quid on a shirt. I don't have to, my life isn't going to go to shit if the podcast exploded and everything, fell down and kind of like I fell down on my face of all this. I'd be fine. I'd survive. And so that allows me to take more risks and reinvest everything that I'm earning to grow the show at a quicker rate. And as you kind of was going through that, this stoic process and this task was going through my mind. So hopefully that might be a test that the audience can implement as well. And Alpesh, I've got one final question and we'll wrap up with this. It's something that I ask everyone that comes on the show. And so I'm sure you're going to have a really interesting insight to it. And that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
I would say my own personal journey. I would say lower my ego. I think as salespeople, we're very forward. We're very sometimes we think we know it all, and unfortunately we don't. And there's always room to learn. I think again, I wish I had more empathy in my sales process before. When I say empathy, I mean really the human connection besides just chasing the numbers. And definitely, I think it was especially in my younger years, there was a bit of an ego, and I think it obviously created some obstacles for me, which needn't have been there in the first place.
So people have said similar things on the show in the past. Is this an age thing? being, full of testosterone, full of hustle as a young fella, the ego kind of takes over, it has the ability to take hold of you? Or, and where I'm going with this is, how did you diminish that? Did you have the insight to know that you had a big ego and knock it back, or was it just experience and time as you kind of grow?
Unfortunately, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I didn't learn very quickly. It took me 30 years to learn exactly what I'm all about. It's taken me 30 years. That's why it's all in the book here. And I see a lot of young entrepreneurs now, young salespeople. They call me up all the time, Alpesh, this and that, and I have very good advice for them. Depending on their circumstances, on don't get too excited. Don't get too excited. Don't get too desperate. When you get too desperate and you really want that sale, it's probably going to come and bite you afterwards. A no is actually the new yes. Right? The more you say no, the more successful you will become. You don't have to chase 200 customers. Chase the 20 who are going to give you the yes. You get me? It's all about qualifying. And unfortunately, yes, a lot of these things come out of physical and age experience. But
why?
Why? I mean, if you're young now and you've got the tools of the internet and all that, you've got access to guys like us. Really talk to the older guys, because they can they can help you on your path. They can help you on your journey.
Amazing. Well, with that, tell us a little bit about the book, where we can find it, and then of course I'll link to it in the show notes as well for everyone who's listening.
So Tested is that's the book. It's out on Amazon 2 days ago. It's getting already 5-star reviews. It's Tested. The dream is free, but the hustle comes at a cost. There's always a price to pay for your dreams, whether it's blood, sweat, tears, or money. All 4 of them I have paid. It's a true story. It's a 350-page roller coaster ride spanning 4 continents. There is a lot of learnings in this book. There is a lot of mistakes that I've made that I hope people can learn from. And most of my tests have maybe, people reading it will resonate with their parts of their lives. At the end of each chapter, there's lessons learned that we've put together. Buki has been kind enough to do those. And I think it's one of those reality books where there's a lot of good stuff out there on the bookshelves. There's a lot of stuff that tells you how to do things. Tested, this book is about how not to do things.
Amazing. Well, I'll link to the book, as I mentioned it in the show notes to this episode of salesmanpodcast.com. I'll link to the websites and everything else for everyone who wants to learn more about you both. And with that, chaps, Alpesh, Buki, I just want to thank you again for your time, your insights. This has been a really fun one for me to record, so I appreciate that. And I'll thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.